Estamos nosotros en una entrevista con Matt Hougan. Él es el Chief Investment Officer de Bitwise, que es uno de los grandes, digamos, actores en el mercado de los activos digitales. Muchas cosas pasando en los activos digitales. Y no solamente eso, sino que, en definitiva, al haber una cantidad de inversionistas institucionales entrando en el sector, es algo a lo cual le tenemos que prestar atención porque probablemente durante los próximos trimestres, en la medida en que la crisis que tenemos actual, digamos, quede atrás, estos actores van a entrar. Matt, thank you for being in our platform. It's a pleasure. You don't need a lot of presentation. Everybody knows you in the field. So thank you for coming to the platform, please.
Thanks for having me, Victor, and buen día y buen negocio.
Thank you. Gracias. Matt, listen, quickly. The Bitcoin have some sort of, and then when we speak about digital assets, normally we speak about the Bitcoin, but we have the Ethereum, and I also want to speak with you about the Ethereum and the XRP. But obviously, the important part is that we see after President Trump won the election on May 5th, we got some sort of ramp up to over the 100,000. And then obviously a lot of technical people from the institutional world are seeing a kind of a retracement towards potentially 70-something, where they feel is the value zone to buy again the Bitcoin. If you can articulate what is your opinion, obviously you manage a lot of money for institutional clients and you have an expertise on that asset class. If you can educate us and our Latin audience and Spanish-speaking audience, that would be great.
That's absolutely right. You know, you mentioned that we're seeing this sort of movement of institutional investors into the space, and it's set to accelerate. And I think that explains what's happening to the price. Right now, long-term in Bitcoin, there's a structural difference between demand and supply. The Bitcoin network only produces 160,000 Bitcoin a year, but institutions are buying hundreds of thousands every year through ETFs, through corporations, etc. The reason we ran up to $100,000 post-election was that all these institutions came into the market and bought, pushing the price up. The reason we're talking about pulling back maybe to 70,000 is that was the previous all-time high. So there's some people who are willing to sell between $70,000 and $100,000. I think the most likely scenario is that this sort of continual demand from institutions pushes us up above 100,000. I think we'll end the year around $200,000 actually, as this institutional demand comes into the market. So that's what I'm seeing from Bitwise.
Excellent. The other question that I think is important for all our audience to understand the magnitude of the penetration of the ETF, which is a huge, important vehicle for the institution to try to allocate, is in the whole overall Bitcoin space. And let's just focus on the Bitcoin again. What is the penetration of the ETF? What is the market share that the people like Bitwise, your company, and other competitors are accumulating for the overall amount of the Bitcoins out there?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the Bitcoin ETFs launched in January of last year. They were the most successful ETF launch of all time. ETFs are the primary way today that institutional investors and retail investors in the US allocate into the capital market. So they use them more than stocks. They use them more than mutual funds. They're the primary tool. We saw the ETFs launch. $37 billion of money flowed into them in the first year alone. That bought about 500,000 Bitcoin in total, brought the assets up to about 500,000. So today that's around, you know, Bitcoin ETFs own a substantial portion of the market, but not a lot of it. There's still a huge amount of money that needs to come into this space, that will come into this space via ETFs. I think we've just sort of gotten started, and there'll be multiple years of significant inflows to follow.
I like your optimism, and obviously the other question is, and I would like to understand if this is real and what do you think about it, because obviously if the reality is that the big bulge bracket firm, wealth manager, let's say the JP Morgans of the world, the Goldman Sachs, are not completely allowing their financial advisors and wealth management private bankers to pitch allocation to, let's say, Bitcoins via this vehicle, the ETF, there is a dormant demand that we think at some point, if everything goes some sort in the right direction for the crypto world, it's going to be a lot of allocations because they're probably going to go to 1 or 2%. What do you have to say about that, Matt? Which I think is important for every family, every affluent, not only American, Asian, European, but the Latino families that have the money in the big firms as well.
This is absolutely a critical point. If you think about what happened after the Bitcoin ETFs launched, it took the price of Bitcoin from 50,000 over 100,000. Even today, we're in the $80,000 range. And as you mentioned, that happens without the largest groups of wealth in the US being able to buy them. I know that sounds strange, but whether it's Morgan Stanley or Wells Fargo or UBS or Merrill Lynch, you mentioned JP Morgan, you mentioned Goldman Sachs, most, if not all of those, still restrict their advisors from using these ETFs. That's going to change this year. And once it does, there's billions of dollars of more that have to and will come into this market. You mentioned 1 or 2%. We're regularly seeing 3 to 5% here at Bitwise. So people are increasing their allocation. I think there are, years of this institutional capital to come into the market. And traditional investors, retail investors, investors listening to this program have a short-term opportunity to get ahead of those institutional investors. So that's why this is such an important market or moment in the market, because those institutions are coming. They're not all here yet, but they will be here in the near future. And that's going to be a major new source of demand.
Excellent. Listen, the other thing I want to discuss with you, and when we came from the institutional world, we have this major institution that by regulation, they have to report. For example, this next week, we have the end of the first quarter of 2025. A few days later, there is obviously release the profits and how companies that are listed have to report, but also funds, big players are required by law. I think it's something called the 13F. They need to report that. And that's where other institutions are seeing who's owning, who's selling, compared, let's say, quarter to quarter. Is that, again, something happening in the crypto world? And if you and any of your competitors are always seeing who's accumulating when they disclose that information, Matt?
That's exactly right. Yeah, you have to disclose it every quarter. So we saw, for instance, in Q4, that the percentage of assets held by institutional investors went up about 50% over Q3. So a clear sign that they were coming into the market. We learned that there were major mainstream institutions using ETFs to gain exposure to Bitcoin. There were university endowments. There were state retirement planning firms. The Sovereign Wealth Fund of Abu Dhabi bought $500 million of Bitcoin ETFs. So these 13F filings give us a window into who's buying. And I'll tell you this, every time we see a new batch of these filings, every quarter, the quality and the number of institutions is going up very fast. I expect when we see the Q1 filings, we're going to see a large number of institutional investors, most of the largest hedge funds in the world, and many of the largest financial advisors showing that they have an allocation to Bitcoin.
Listen, man, give me 1 second. I'm going to try to explain it in español quickly what we've been discussing. La primera cosa que hablamos con Matt es indudablemente qué piensa él luego de que algunos dicen que a niveles de 70,000 el Bitcoin obviamente podría llegar en el caso de que el mercado caiga. Él sigue diciendo que obviamente hay gente que acumuló en esos niveles y que es muy importante ver qué puede venir después de que toda esta tormenta a raíz de los aranceles esté pasando. La otra cosa interesante indudablemente es el hecho de una demanda represada, porque las firmas importantes no están dejando que sus asesores les digan a esos clientes, dígase las familias adineradas, que compren ningún tipo de los activos. La otra cosa que discutimos con Matt es indudablemente qué pasa con las instituciones que tienen que reportar, y él nos está diciendo que obviamente esas instituciones en el primer quarter del 2025 tienen efectivamente que empezar a decir que tienen el activo, y eso va a mover el mercado cuando esto se sepa a mediados de abril o a principios de mayo más tardar. Matt, in terms of the Ethereum and the XRP and any of the other, let's say, coins, how is the market evolving into that so we can migrate only, from only the Bitcoin to a more robust crypto asset kind of portfolios, ETF, and other instrument, please?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we already have Ethereum ETFs out there, so people are able to buy them from Bitwise and others. We've seen some demand for those. We expect in the second half of the year, there's a good chance that the SEC might approve ETFs for XRP, for Solana, and for some other assets. I would tell people, you know, they ask me, how do you personally invest in the space? The way I invest, Victor, is I own them all. I'm old enough to remember the early days of the internet when there was Yahoo and Google and Ask Jeeves and all these different providers, and it was hard to tell who would win. The best bet at the time was just to buy the bulk of them and bet that the internet would win over time. I think there's an element where that's true in crypto. Look, I'm a huge Bitcoin fan. I think it's going to be enormous. I also love Ethereum and some other assets, but from an investment perspective, I like to diversify my exposure, because the thing that I'm most confident about is that crypto will be more important in the future than it is today. And if that's the bet you want to make, you want to own a variety of them. And the good news is we should get more ETFs approved later this year. And again, we already have Bitcoin and Ethereum, the two largest assets, and you can divide your portfolio between them.
I love your passion and optimism. And to finish the interview, I'm going to ask you a very basic question that probably people that are in our platform do not understand. For example, when you buy a Bitcoin by yourself with any of the exchanges, you can buy and hold. And some people think that because the Bitcoin can storage value, the best place to buy and hold. When you compare that strategy, which is extremely simple, what is the difference that an ETF will provide to the people that want to allocate their money? And there is any difference that only buying and hold forever? And it's important because it's the way you can educate more and more people to understand the ETF world. Not only that, to be able and being willing to pay the little share that every ETF management company shares to manage the portfolio and the AUM.
Yeah, the incredible thing about an ETF is that it lets individual investors invest on the same terms as the largest institutions in the world. So literally, you can buy the same ETF as Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund. You can buy the same ETF that the largest hedge funds in the world are using to access Bitcoin. I raise that because, of course, you can do it yourself through a brokerage, and we love some of those brokerages like Coinbase and Kraken and others. They do a good job. But the ETFs provide institutional custody, institutional trading, institutional audit and tax and management, all for a very low fee. It's kind of an incredible deal. Imagine standing side by side with 9 of the 10 largest hedge funds owning the same thing. You can do that with Bitcoin ETFs. It's really a wonderful gift to individual investors, and it's how I invest most of my crypto money.
Listen, very happy to have you in the Tribune. We probably want to invite you from time to time, especially to see what happened with the space, the crypto space, with the Trump administration after we weathered the uncertain times that we are living through with the tariff and all the changes, the detox diet that the Secretary Bessent is saying about the economy, that is definitely going to affect every asset class, including the most volatile Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so on. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for being on our platform, and we'll speak with you soon again.
Thanks for having me.